So I'm going to open up with a huge welcome to Mr. Jamie Halcomb, CIO of the US Patent and Trademark Office, and our moderator today, Mr. Jay Sabu. I'm going to introduce Jay, and Jay is going to introduce our speaker and tell us also a little bit about Harmonia Holdings before we turn it over to all the burning questions people have about USPTO. Jay, thank you for being our moderator today. Jay is the Chief Operating Officer for Harmonia Holdings Group, LLC. Harmonia is a leading provider of information technology services to the federal agencies. He and his wife, Pallavi, co-founded Harmonia, and along with their CTO, Dr. Mark Abrams. Jay, I'm going to turn it over to you because you do justice to your profile more than I do. So I'm going to turn over the microphone to you.
Thank you, Rena. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session, this webinar with Mr. Jamie Holcomb, hosted by the American Asian Chamber of Commerce. Just a very brief word about Harmonia. Harmonia Holdings Group was founded in 2006 and has been at the forefront of providing software development and data analytics solutions to the federal government, both on the civilian as well as the defense side. We are a top secret cleared company. We've done a lot of business, and we've been very privileged to do business with the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, and as well as in commerce. We have had a really good relationship with the US Patent and Trademark Office as well, where we've had a prime contract to help them test all of their enterprise systems for the past 6 years. But this seminar, this webinar is not about Harmonia. So let me go ahead and introduce to you our speaker for today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you Henry Jamie Holcomb, Chief Information Officer for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. As you may know, the PTO is unique among federal agencies because it operates solely on fees collected and not on taxpayer dollars. It is also one of the most data and information intensive agencies within the government, an important data point to help understand the significance of Jamie's role as the principal advisor to the agency on the design, development, and management of its information systems and the technologies upon which they are built. Prior to his current role, Mr. Holcomb has held multiple executive leadership roles in the corporate world. Most recently, Jamie served as the Chief Executive Officer for Visium Technologies, a cybersecurity startup, and Chief Operations Officer of TJ Westlake LLC, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Prior to that, he served as Harris's Vice President for Information Technology for Global Systems and Processes before taking over as Vice President and General Manager for Harris Caprock Critical Networks, leading the company's government solutions line of business, which included managing security services and supporting air traffic management, energy and maritime communications, ground network operations and sustainment, and high-value IT and engineering cyber services. Mr. Holcomb has also served as Vice President of Information Systems for Universal Service Administrative Company, as the Chief Technology Officer, Senior VP of Operations, and Corporate Secretary for Globix Corporation, and Chief Information Officer for Cambrian Communications LLC. Prior to that, he began his career as an officer in the U.S. Army, where he was awarded both the Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award and Most Outstanding Officer of the Year in Hawaii. He graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point with a Bachelor of Science degree, finishing first in his class in computer science. He went on to get an MBA in information systems as well as a master's in computer science. Mr. Holcomb, thank you very much for taking this time to share your insights with us on the state of information technology in general and specific to the PTO. I want to hand over the presentation and the mic to you.
Well, thank you so much for that very warm welcome. I'm honored to be able to present to you all today and discuss the mission of the PTO. and you'll see that it's entitled Mission Matters. And that's because it really does. What is our mission? Well, we are a mission enabler at the office of the CIO. So just doing IT for IT's sake is no longer acceptable. We need to stabilize, secure, and modernize our core infrastructure. Now, if you didn't know it, we have about 13,000 individuals in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, with about 8,000 patent examiners and 800 trademark examiners. As you can see from the slide, we are experiencing an unheard of growth and demand for our services. And you can see that we are going forward with artificial intelligence and machine learning. In fact, one of the funny things I always say is, I've been doing artificial intelligence for over 30 years, and I still don't believe Skynet is possible. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not going to be jumping down from the sky anytime soon. But I do believe in machine learning and the algorithms thereof. And in fact, so much so that I took a number of our highly qualified engineers that are government federal employees, and we split them up. We sent about 6 to the West Coast and 6 to the East Coast. And they became googly. And what does that mean? Well, they were Google certified in the neural network open algorithms called TensorFlow. And when they came back to the USPTO, we have been able to put together a great program of simulations and models to the point now where we're classifying and searching using these great algorithms and machine learning. One of the big things that we also did most recently was increase our telework infrastructure. As mentioned before, we had 13,000 employees overall. About 8,000 of them were always teleworking ever since the 2010 and 2012 timeframe. What we had to do recently when COVID struck was go to mandatory telework, where all 13,000 of our staff were forced to work remotely from their homes. We were able to scale up because of our infrastructure. And I will tell you that serendipity sometimes is a great thing. In moving to the modernization, we were planning for and moving forward on plans to actually increase the bandwidth. So we went from a 6 gigabit per second connection to a 10 gigabit per second connection in the early January timeframe. Luck be have it, March hits and we were able to execute against that. And we were able to scale up those software licenses and scale up on our hardware. So we were able to accommodate the 75% increase that we had from about 8,000 to just over 14,000 simultaneous VPN connections each and every day for the last 5 months. We've also had many people on our WebEx teleconferences, and it's gone, we haven't missed a beat. So much so that our productivity amongst the examiners has increased dramatically year over year. But when we look at the analysis of that, we find out that people aren't taking summer vacation. There's no place to go. And so because of that, they are bearing down on their work and the numbers are through the roof. But we're lucky that is because the demand numbers are also record breaking. As mentioned before, we had to stabilize and secure our environment over the last 18 months in order for all this to happen. Now we are at the next point or our phase when we're going to modernize and move out to the cloud. In order to do that, we have to take our legacy systems and through an agile DevSecOps methodology, we are going to be moving into the cloud, the public cloud. We might take a stutter step into the private cloud. And that's the multi-cloud strategy. where you're going from on-prem to private cloud to public cloud. We don't want to jump in all at first because we want to ensure we continue the operations using our legacy systems, and then as we can, moving to the more modern architectures. In order to do that, we've actually moved into new valuable services for the COVID-19 outbreak. As an example, within 10 days, we were able to show a Patents for Partnerships website, which allows people to search for patents that are available for licensing. We want people to be able to use those great inventions, whether they be COVID or not, to get out there and get the economy rolling. Patents provides the engine of growth for businesses. We want to monetize all those great ideas. And in order to do that, we're hoping to publish these availabilities. So please go out there and see if you can work on those inventors and get that business moving. We also did something, and we'll talk about this in question and answers, I hope, is to improve the automated access to some of our most high value data. And that's through the public pair, looking at our patent application, our patents that are actually awarded and available. As mentioned before, in order to modernize, what we've done is gone from a project-based organization, a PMO, into a product-based category management. And you can see we have 4 product lines. They are number 1, patents, number 2, trademarks, number 3, the back office, things like finance, legal, and HR, and number 4 is the IT infrastructure. Each of those product lines has about 8 products. The biggest difference in managing these products is the fact that they're all led by a product owner from the business unit, not from IT. That business owner will be in charge of and make the decisions at the recommendations and the expertise of technical architects assigned to that product team. The product team will be the essence of moving forward at the PTO into modernization. We are taking all the old O&M and giving it to the development teams. So now a product team is together, dev, sec, ops, truly together, managed together, deciding together what is the right thing for the business. And you can see those product teams in front of you with the 30 different products. In order to enable that, we also have to think about the design of our past legacy systems, which were well designed in the client server world. That no longer applies when you have the internet as your infrastructure and your base. In order to do this, then, we're creating microservices, and we're going to strangle out the old client server base such that we can have a loosely coupled architecture rather than the tightly coupled architecture we currently experience. Right now, it's very difficult for us to take out any one single component because it has deleterious effects on the other components within the system. So what we're trying to do is create an atmosphere where if I deploy something this week, I can rip it out and deploy a better something next week. We have that in mind. What we need to do is continuously modernize. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all. When you continuously modernize, it requires more discipline than before. But we have to get to the point of technology where, just like in the commercial world, we become accustomed to an overnight version update in our cell phones. Why can't we do the same thing with our systems at the USPTO? We can, and we will. Finally, in order to do this, what we're going to have to do is change the way we contract for services. Not that it's wrong, but it's just a different way. So the development, infrastructure, ops, and maintenance, as you can see in the horizontal slices, were done by function. So there were a lot of times where there's an incentive for one contractor not to get along with another contractor because they're on different contracts, but they're holding up different ends of the development pipeline. So what I'm trying to do is bring back some sanity to agile, better, cheaper, and faster delivery of business value by doing the vertical lines you see there for products, where the contract will be a function of all development infrastructure, ops and maintenance, cyber, and training, rather than relying upon the individual contracts. Now, this is a hard thing because it's not just IT, it also is finance and procurement. So we're having a market change in procurement and how we think about going out to the commercial world. In doing that, you can see that we're looking at we're looking at new GWACs to actually use in those vertical yellow lines. Things such as CIOSP3, NASA SOUP, Alliant 2, VA T4s NG, and others. There's a lot of GWACs that we can use at the USPTO that we don't have to create. Of course, the biggest one right now that's still in competition is BOSS. So unfortunately, I won't be able to answer a lot of questions about BOSS other than to say, yes, it is part of our strategy moving forward. And with that, I wanted to get to your questions because I could talk all day, but what matters is that you get your questions answered.
Well, thank you so much. Jay, I'm going to bring you back on live to see if you want to ask some of the questions that you had planned out and others that are coming in.
Absolutely. Rena, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. So Jamie, thank you for a really informative and quick presentation. Let me start off the Q&A session with a question about why you're at PTO. You've had a fabulous career a career run in the corporate world. You've sort of been on the large business side as well as the small business side. What were your motivations behind switching to a leadership role in IT in the government?
Well, I will tell you first and foremost, mission matters. That was the title of our presentation. And the fact of the matter is, the director at the USPTO, the Undersecretary for Intellectual Property, gentleman named Andre Yanku, who's an IP attorney from Los Angeles, actually convinced me to create a better engine of growth for the U.S. economy. As you can well imagine, being an old Army guy, jumping out of aircraft, rappelling out of helicopters, making sure the communications are in and all the computers are working well in the tactical battlefield, I am mission oriented. And one of the things that Andre brought to my attention was we really do need to modernize the Patent and Trademark Office so that it can take advantage of all the new tools that are out there, all the tools that I was also part of developing and selling to the U.S. Department of Defense and the intelligence communities. There is a big need for a good civilian commercial tool set, and there's no reason why we have to accept the fact of old bureaucratic work processes. So that really inspired me to create a difference and create what we're doing inside of the PTO called a culture shift. If you can see that, it's a culture shift. I give the poker chips out to people so that they remember we are in the midst of a culture shift. And the fact of the matter is, in order to get them to understand, what you have to do is change your behavior. You need the ABCs of actual culture shift. And that is act now, be bold, and to simplify. And of course, well, wait a minute. Is that the way the government spells simplify with a C? No. It's the way I'm doing it so that you don't forget. So ABC, act now, be bold, and simplify. And that's what we're trying to do, is create that cultural shift. at the USPTO to enable the Agile DevSecOps to really take root and to think differently about the way we approach our jobs every day.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Here's another question for you. So your background is unique in that you've held executive positions in large business, leading the government divisions, as well as you've led small businesses, seeking to do business with the US government. Our audience today has a number of owners and executives from small to medium-sized businesses. What advice would you give them if they are seeking to do business with and serve the needs of the USPTO going forward?
What a great question, because that's why we're talking to one another, creating the dialogue needed to understand the requirements and then understand the capabilities so that a transaction can occur. And I tell you what, my experience with small businesses as a COO of the SDVOSB were invaluable. My experiences trying to raise money for this startup and trying to kick something off the ground is phenomenal, because it really shows you that the engine of growth for the US are the individual entrepreneur, the private equity investors, and getting them hooked up together with great ideas to make things better, cheaper, and faster. Those are the three things that we're trying to do. So, how can we get together? My whole thing about the experience of a small business is you don't have the yoke of the corporate legal and procurement and HR. You don't have that resistance to you when you are purporting new ideas. So I'm looking to the small business community to actually give me that innovation that we require to leapfrog us over into the newer technologies. I could look to the old system integrators, the old IT service providers, because I know them. I was one. But I understand that community very well. I also understand the larger yet spread out community of the small business entrepreneur. And I'm really looking forward to the creativity of not only working, but contracting and getting those great ideas. As an example, machine learning for the USPTO. So I'm really excited about the ability or the capabilities that the small business community can bring to the USPTO. And I don't think we've actually extracted the goodness that is out there. So I want to open that realm up. I want to be able to say USPTO is open for business for the small guy.
How would you propose for small businesses to be able to do that, Jamie? As an example, we recently had a situation where USDA did something very interesting. They laid out a few topics and then asked small and large businesses to send them 1 or 2 minute videos of their ideas. Is that something that you might institute or welcome, or is there another mechanism for small businesses to be able to kind of get their ideas and their innovations out to your team in a succinct way?
Yes, I love that idea. Let me first go off of, I'm totally familiar with the USDA, and I think it's a great example for a lot of other federal agencies as well. CIS did the whole concept of creating not a hackathon, but sort of a developer-a-thon, where you come in, you take a great team, and they have a bake-off. I like that idea too. But as far as the video goes, I will tell you that what you should be doing as a small business is producing that YouTube video that's out there that separates you from the rest of the pack, such that in the marketing materials or the capability statement, you can always reference that YouTube video, a short 5 to 10 minute outline that differentiates you, that shows the core service or product that you can deliver for other agencies. Realize one of the things that I purport that I think a lot of other folks in the federal government also ascribe to is risk aversion from being bleeding edge. I don't want my nose bloodied, but I will be a fast follower, or I can lead as long as I'm not in the front of the pack getting my nose bloodied. I just want to do something that's tried and true that I can actually scale with. So based on that, I have found YouTube videos that show if you direct it this way or direct it that way, it can be used in your agency as one of the most effective ways to get CIOs and others interested in your product or service.
Excellent, excellent answer, sir. So here's a question from the audience. Does the USPTO accept unsolicited proposals? If yes, how does the industry go about submitting them?
All right, you're going beyond my level of expertise. However, you know, I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. No, I didn't. No. Anyway, one of the things I will say is you always check with procurement. And the Office of Procurement, the small business advocate's name is Portia Deans. And so we'll make sure you have this before you leave, but Papa, Oscar, Romeo, Tango, India, Alpha, dot, Delta, Echo, Alpha, November, Sierra, at USPTO.gov. She will be able to accept your capability statements, and she'll be able to put your email online whenever an opportunity comes out that you should be aware of. Portia Deans is a great advocate for the small business.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that information. Here's another question for you, again related to the innovation and trying to get new technologies for the benefit of the PTO. Does the PTO intend to use the SBIR program for evaluating emerging technologies and proof of concepts?
The answer is an unequivocally no. Why? SBIR is DOD. We're not in the DOD. Now, can we use it? I haven't checked that out yet, but there's no need for us to use it because we have the ability, based on Title 35, the U.S. Code, to actually conduct market research. And we love to conduct market research alongside commercial ventures. If we go at it together and we say, you know, in 30, 60, and 90 days, we can get this result and have this to show for it, I'm all for that. And so because of the different ways we can contract and proof of concepts, I'm all over a short 90-day proof of concept to prove out before you scale anything. I'm not going to commit our resources to something that doesn't work. I'm also not going to commit the USPTO to anything that doesn't scale. But the balance in between that is very important. You have to prove that it works, then you have to prove that it can scale. The two are not mutually exclusive. You have to have both as sufficient to move forward. And I think that answered the question.
That does. And that's a great answer, sir. Thank you. Questions related to, I guess, procurement. And so, obviously answer it to your level of comfort. What is a strategy? I know that BOSS is under procurement and evaluation right now, so we'll steer clear of that, obviously. But the question is, what is the strategy for ITSS2 and IDAI recompetes? I know that those were vehicles that are currently ongoing at PTO. So the question from a member of the audience is, does the PTO intend to recompete those, or what's the strategy relating to the work under that or those vehicles?
Again, I can't speak for procurement, but I will say that based on the slides you were presented, the fact is, if we can use a GWAC, a government-wide acquisition contract, we should. And that's a lot different than the way the USPTO was going before. BOSS will occur. Obviously, it's in the chute and it's happening. But other than that, I don't know if we should continue some of these old contracts, only because they might not apply in the future. Why keep something old when you can have something new? And why create something new when something's already been created? So that's why the GWAC, the government-wide acquisition vehicles, are so important. Alliant 2, NASA SOUP, CIOSP3, VA's T4NG, and there's a couple other ones that just don't come to the top of my mind, but they're out there and we can use them. I am going to be using the lessons of other agencies, and I hope they'll be using my lessons. You know, as an example, I just would like to make sure folks know the Copyright Office, who is not within the purview of the executive branch, they're actually underneath the Library of Congress, a totally separate branch in the US government. And they're in the Library of Congress as the registrar, the copyright registrar. Yet, it's one of the 4 pillars of intellectual property: patents, trademarks, copyright, and trade law. Trade law actually fits within the FBI, but you'll find out that many people come to the Patent and Trademark Office to learn about the ins and outs of the law around intellectual property. In fact, the FBI learns about how they can enforce the trade law. And why am I mentioning all of that? Because we need to work together, the FBI, the Copyright Office, USPTO, and in essence, they just went out on a programming effort to create a web portal for the Copyright Office. Well, instead of creating from brand scratch new, I said, hey, here's what we developed in-house. Why don't you just use this and do a global search and replace from my USPTO to my copyright? And so I'd like to see that more often in the government, where we can reuse the software and create the utility that IT actually brings, the potential for reuse and lower cost with higher efficiencies.
Thank you for that answer, sir. One question again related to, I guess, acquisitions and IDIQs. I know that you mentioned NASA SOUP as well as T4NG and CIOSP3, all GWACs and vehicles that you can use. Do you also intend to use ADA stars too, since it's now got a higher ceiling, and IT70, for example?
Well, we use IT70 today, so yes, and we'll use whatever makes sense and that we're allowed to use. So yes, 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 yes.
All right. All right. We got that.
I'm going to interrupt the conversation. Sorry, Jay, I just want to make sure the audience has asked this repeatedly. So Mr. Holcomb, can you please repeat Portia Dean's email address one more time so I can type it into the chat box for our audience?
Yeah, I do apologize. The military phonetic alphabet, some people don't know, but I'll try to just do regular, right? PORTIADEANS@USPTO.gov.
Thank you. Jay, over to you.
All right. Thank you. Jamie, the PTO, the USPTO has and this is, I'm going to take you away from the acquisitions part,
Thanks.
Obviously, collaborates very extensively with the European Patent and Trademark Office and the Japanese Patent and Trademark Offices. How does that collaboration extend to matters of how information technology is utilized, and if so, how?
Yes, I mean, they talk about the big 5 throughout the world, and we all get together and we all share information. Of course, one of the parts of information we share to make sure no one's infringing on others' intellectual property rights is the actual patents that have been awarded. And you can get that through 2 primary ways. There's something called public pair, and the second one is called PEDS, P-E-D-S. Now, the public pair system is not the greatest because it's an older system, and there's a lot of design considerations in a new world that public pair really cannot address. It was meant to address the single practitioner, a sole user getting on and looking up a patent application. Whereas PEDS, P-E-D-S, was looked upon to do an electronic bulk submission and bulk distribution of a number of different patents. Both systems are not as well thought out in today's world. They were fine for yesterday's world. They're not good for today's world. And we are redoing them right now to the point where we'll have a basic core foundation, and then based on Agile DevSecOps and the feedback we receive from the public, we are going to be continuously modernizing both those applications moving forward. And because the general public can know them, so can the other agencies throughout the world. It's very important that we're able to ensure that people understand what has been awarded so they don't stomp on our intellectual property. They don't use it because they can always claim ignorance, but ignorance is no excuse. You need to know what it is out there, and then you need to be able to enforce it. And in order to enforce it, we need to make sure that it's available to everyone to see that it was awarded and it definitely belongs to XYZ.
Thank you. One more question. So if you had a, let me ask another question first. In your presentation, you talked about machine learning and the value that you assign to machine learning. If you had to guess, and again, it's a little bit of a crystal ball question, but which three technologies, the top three technologies, do you think are going to have a real impact on our world over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? If you had to guess, if you had to put a list together, what would be the top three? It seems like machine learning seems like one of them, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'll let you talk to them.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. You broke up there for a second. Could you just repeat the question very succinct?
Oh, yeah. So my question was, if you had a crystal ball, what, or maybe not, just based on your experience and knowledge of technologies, what are the top three technologies, emerging technologies, that you believe would really impact our world over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So number one, it's not emerging. It's already here. It's just not been implemented throughout the federal government. And that is robotic process automation, RPA. No matter what flavor or brand you use, we need to take down these ugly, routine, clerical, and administrative tasks and automate them with RPA. There's no need for a human to be involved with all these mundane, over and over tasks. Once that's done, that can free up the human mind to think better about how to get more efficient and cost effective and time effective as well. So RPA is number one. Of course, I do think machine learning will provide a lot of deep analysis and glean some items of wisdom that heretofore we were not able to understand. At the same time, we shouldn't take those pearls of wisdom and then apply them in a static way. Since the world is changing and so dynamic, just because you have a result at the end of this period doesn't mean that it applies to next period. And so many people have a problem with that concept. Past performance is no indication of future returns. And you have to keep telling yourself that because the inputs to the system are different as soon as you start. Your assumptions as soon as you start the algorithm are again different. Now, the only way I've found to be able to create a more precise algorithm in that regard is to create a supervised learning loop where a man in the loop can actually create the ability to say, well, that wasn't that way because of some other condition that was not anticipated in the in the initial design of the system. So the only system designs that I believe in are those where you can challenge and change the assumptions to the point where you can actually get something that's useful at the end, rather than just saying, oh, it doesn't apply now. All right, that was number 2. And believe it or not, number 3, I'm going to say, I think the future, maybe 5 or 10 years, holograms are actually going to be coming out to the point where instead of sitting at a screen, we might be looking in the middle of our room and there'll be a projection of a hologram, some type of interaction with a 3D image. And I like that science fiction type of thought-provoking, future.
How could holograms be used by the PTO, perhaps? Is there a way
I haven't thought about that, but in experiencing entertainment, or maybe just in instruction, if you have a hologram in front of you, you don't get that 2D, you get the 3D view, and you can look over somebody's shoulder. You can look at how they're actually doing their art or performing the craft or whatever it might be.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an immersive experience, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's more immersive than looking at a 2D world. And
exactly.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be great? They talk about the remote learning experience right now. The problem is it's just 2D. Imagine if you had a hologram, your teacher can come into your bedroom at your desk and you can see the teacher do all the things that they'd be doing in the classroom, except the teacher can't see you. And so in that regard, you have a lot of great instruction being given anonymously. It doesn't have to be two-way. It can be one-way like that in a mentor-mentee type of learning.
Sure,
I think you
absolutely.
just moved my daughter
It's actually quite interesting because we were kind of doing a little bit of work at home, and we were working with a builder, and they had a technology that was very interesting where they, in order to help us understand the sort of the physical sort of size of things in an addition that we were trying to do, they had this image that they projected down, and we could walk into it and kind of get a sense for exactly what the room looked like. So it was just so different from having to look at the traditional blueprint, right? And just static images. So I understand, I get that. It's a very interesting perspective. One question on technology again, what's your view on blockchain? There's been a lot of hype around it, and there does seem to be great application to it as well. But it seems to be, application, everybody seems to kind of think that blockchain can be applied everywhere. What's your view of that?
I love blockchain. I think, like you said, it's a great technology. Again, a hammer is a great tool, but it's not meant to do everything, right? All right, so knowing that, blockchain is a tool, and I do think it has some large hurdles, and one of those hurdles may be performance. As an example, Bitcoin currently, as I understand it, can only do about 7 transactions per second around the world, whereas MasterCard and Visa are able to do 26 to 28 transactions per second around the world. In order for something to be acceptable in a financial transaction, you need to at least replicate the leaders, and those leaders are Visa and MasterCard. If you can only do 1/4 of that volume currently, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, then your performance threshold is not being met in that regard. Now, there are solutions to it. Look, we could have the distributed ledger good from start to stop. And then, and whatever those start and stop times, or however you want to split it up, you can optimize for performance in that regard. But that loses one of the primary things about traceability back, in that if you have a start and stop, then you can't trace it all the way back to the beginning without going through some other algorithms. And the anonymity part is a problem as well. There is no way to, once you anonymize it in order for you to get back, you have to have some type of authority to understand who the authoritative source was on that transaction. The other real problem that I currently have with blockchain is the private information, the PII poison pill. I don't know if you're aware, but the fact of the matter is, if you do introduce a filtering mechanism to a distributed ledger, many people who are purists in blockchain will say foul. You can't do that. There should be no filtering when you put it in the transaction. The transaction is what the transaction is. And yet, if you were to input somebody's social security number and say such, or somebody's trying to blackmail someone else and put some wire transfer information into the transaction, all of a sudden you've introduced a poison pill to the part where it's distributed all around the world. And as an authoritative source for distributing information, you can't have that as part of your distribution scheme. You just can't do it because you'd be liable for transmitting that information. So there are a couple of blockchain hurdles that need to be overcome in order for it to be more accepted or more applicable.
Do you see, just in case, leave aside, let's say, the Bitcoin and the transactional element of it, but if you look at the kind of the basic concept of blockchain as a more of a, for lack of a better term, a crowdsourcing mechanism to validate information and keep it valid across a kind of a distributed network, do you see an application for that in the future for the Patent and Trademark Office? Is this something where that kind of a technology could be used potentially?
That's why I'm asking you guys. Yes. Do I see the potential? Hell yes. Now, do I see the practical parts? That's where small businesses and innovators come in and say, I can solve that. I can do that. Look at this. Look at that. And so that's what we're accepting. That's what we're trying to do in our proof of concepts. Now, I currently have blockchain actually working within the USPTO in our operations. How about this one? This is phenomenal. We actually have RPA robots and administrators. Well, if a robot or an administrator does a system command, how do we know? Well, we look at the logs. Well, we're creating logs in blockchain such that a system admin can't change it. The robot can't change it. We have authoritative source now distributed who actually did that system command. And that helps us in our security vulnerabilities and also getting passed on security audits. So it's very interesting. We're using blockchain. We're using it for that regard. We have not used it for the register as of yet because of some, really practical problems.
Very good, sir. We're getting to the end. Rena, I think we're getting to the end of the webinar, right? I have one more question, Jamie, for you, and this is from me, and it's unconnected to the PTO. It's almost it is a personal question. Exclusive of members of your family, who would you say are the top 3 people, writers, personalities, who have over the years most influenced your leadership thinking?
Well, I'm going to give number 1 to somebody who has always answered the question, if you were to spend one night with a historical figure, who would it be? And it can't be religious. It has to be, secular. And that would be Ben Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is the quintessential American. And I truly believe in his vision for the future of America. When you look at what it's become, it's fascinating how he had the insight as an entrepreneur and an inventor, right? He is phenomenal. The bifocals, the Franklin stove, lightning in a bottle. I mean, it's phenomenal. So I would definitely say Ben Franklin, number 1. Number 2, I would encourage everyone to read Atlas Shrugged. It is a tome or a story by Ayn Rand, who created a philosophy called objectivism. And although I might not agree with all the different things in objectivism, I do believe that there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the story of capitalism. And I believe in capitalism as a driver for humanity because of the kindness. Now, unfettered capitalism is tough because, you know, all you have to do is read Charles Dickens or, you know, watch The Christmas Carol. But if you have good-natured, good-hearted, good value capitalism, you know, then I think it's our country and our world will progress. And maybe third, unfortunately, I got here's my heart out on a sleeve, right? Personally, I grew up in the era of Ronald Reagan, and I was a Reagan warrior in the U.S. Army. And a lot of people don't get it, but we really did win the Cold War. And that was without destroying the whole world in nuclear Armageddon. We were able to overcome a really tyrannical and authoritarian way of life. And although we have a lot of things to solve in our society, there's no better place on the earth to live than the good old US of A. And so Ronald Reagan had a lot of great things to say, and he was a great American as well. So those are my three influences. I hope that answered your question.
Those are great choices, sir. You brought me back. I read Atlas Shrugged many years ago, and it did have a pretty deep influence on my thinking as well. And again, away from, you know, just from even a totally bipartisan viewpoint, I really do think that Reagan was one of our great presidents, and so I appreciate your viewpoint there. So I'm just going to, at this point, thank you for spending this past approximately 1 hour with us. I want to agree to one little comment that we received in the Q&A for you, and then I'll pass it back to Rita. And this is a gentleman who said, just wanted to say, Jamie is an awesome and next level presenter. So with that, sir, thank you very much. Thank you for your insights. Rena, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, what energy, love it. Love that energy on the call. So thank you for your presentation. And you did share a lot of good information for those of you who want to do business with the USPTO. If you didn't get anything out of these slides, I'm sorry. There's a ton of data in there. So thank you for sharing that. And on behalf of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, again, thank you for spending your time with us. We do want to let the audience know that our members will receive the recording and the slides first, just because we want to be partial to our members, but the rest of you will receive it in about a week. So again, thank you for your time, and Jay, thank you for being such a tremendous moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the contracting committee members for their dedication and support to make AACC Government Contracting webinar series possible.